This is what the old universal censor is growling about in at the end of paper 10. It's exactly what he's talking about. I'll read it to you. Page 116. He introduces this by saying, while no single person of the paradise deities actually fills all deity potential, that's that circle up there to the right, collectively all three do. Three infinite persons seem to be the minimum number of beings required to activate the pre-personal and existential potential of total deity, the deity absolute. We know the universal Father, the eternal Son, and the infinite Spirit as persons, but I do not personally know the deity absolute. I love and worship God the Father. I respect and honor the deity absolute. It's a nice distinction. I once sojourned in the universe where a certain group of beings taught that the finaliters in eternity were eventually to become the children of the deity absolute. But I am unwilling to accept this solution of the mystery which enshrouds the future of the finaliters. The core of the finality embraces, among others, those mortals of time and space who have attained perfection in all that pertains to the will of God. As creatures, and within the limits of creature capacity, they fully and truly know God. Having thus found God as the Father of all creatures, these finaliters must sometime begin the quest for the superfinite Father. But this quest involves a grasp of the absonite nature of the ultimate attributes and character of the Paradise Father, second floor of the firehouse. Eternity will disclose whether such an attainment is possible. But we are convinced, even if the finaliters do grasp the ultimate of divinity, they will probably be unable to attain the super-ultimate levels of absolute deity. That's the third floor of the firehouse. And then he hedges. It may be possible that the finaliters will partially attain the deity absolute, sub-infinite penetration. But even if they should, still in the eternity of eternities, the problem of the universal absolute will continue to intrigue, mystify, baffle, and challenge the ascending and progressive finaliters, for we perceive that the unfathomability of the cosmic relationships of the universal absolute will tend to grow in proportions as the material universes and their spiritual administration continue to expand. He's growing faster than the finaliters are growing. That's what that sub-infinite penetration means, I think.
You mean the universal absolute is growing fast?
Yeah, we never make him. We never get there.
He's got a motorboat and we got a rowboat.
That's right. I think we'll attain the deity absolute as God the absolute in some sense. But I don't think we'll ever comprehend the deity absolute. As we someday will understand the Supreme Being, and at some immeasurably more remote day, we will understand the ultimate of deity.
What does that last sentence mean? Only infinity can disclose the Father infinitely.
In other words, he knows we're never going to catch up to the universal absolute, and the Father as infinite is something on beyond that. We can go a long ways.
It never ends almost.
We can go a long ways, and the place where we get stuck is the nicest place on earth to get stuck, because it's on the third level of the firehouse, and the reason we're stuck is there's no ceiling. There is no ceiling. We can attain something on the first floor because there's a ceiling, a limit. We can attain something on the second floor because while the ceiling is enormously high, if the ceiling on the first floor is 2 inches above the floor, then on the second floor, it's some 1,600 miles. You can't see the ceiling of the second floor, but it's there. We'll get there someday. But on the third floor, no ceiling. So we can never reach goal attainment because there is no limit on the third floor. We start out in the upper left-hand corner conventionally with her fried egg with the yellow and the white. And this is the hypothetical static moment of eternity before any actuals have come from potentials and before even potentials have differentiated from the continuum of infinity, whatever those words mean. Here we pull the yolk out of the white, keeping the white shaded for identification. And this is the segregation of all that which is free will from all that which is not free will. And Betty, this is not untrammeled free will. Even here there are some restrictions, because it would be constitutionally impossible for God to do the ungodlike thing.
I'm glad to hear it.
And the rules of compossibility from the paper on supreme development would also govern. As they say, even God cannot create a square circle or perpetrate evil which is inherently good. And the word compossibility there means that when he creates a circle, that determines circularity in contrast to squareness. Even then, it's not a magical universe. The introduction of the intermediate circle, producing the linked circles, is in realization that there is still a relationship between the white and the yolk. And that middle circle symbolizes the universal absolute. And I always use linked circles to portray the three absolutes, in contrast to concentric circles for the Trinity. To me, this is the picture of the absolutes. We put an A out there, which is not germane to the story at all. But it is from this level, I think, that the Father fragments. And that A stands for thought adjusters. Because you'll recall, this is still true. It never changed. This is still true. It never changed. This is still true. It never changed. These frames, which we think of as a sequence, I think we should think of as pancakes piled one on top of another. This happens to be the bottom pancake or the top one. It doesn't make any difference which. It's at one end of the series. This is a simultaneous sequential series. That's almost as good as the paper, simultaneous sequential. Here we start with our three circles linked, and now we have differentiation taking place within the yolk. Here we have the Father moving away from the Son, and at the same time giving expression to paradise, and I put paradise outside of the yolk, because the yolk is total deity. Paradise emerged from there, but paradise is not deity. Paradise has deity as a source, but it itself is not divine. And then, I think this is the personal level of creation. This, to me, would be pre-personal, which is why I think adjusters are fragmented at this point. In our last frame, it gets all complicated. We have the Father, we have the Son, we have paradise, and we have now the Spirit emerging from the Father-Son union and activating paradise to cause paradise to do two things. First, to produce Havona immediately. And second, to disgorge space potency, which is the stuff of the then uncreated universes, everything outside of Havona. And this space potency moves over to the white of the egg, which is the unqualified absolute, which in the papers is defined as the revealer, regulator, and repository of that which has paradise as its source and origin. Paradise bestowed matter, or the potential for matter, and this bestowal took place just once in eternity. It's not a continuing thing. So all of the potential for all universes did come from paradise at this time. Up until about here, I would call the yoke the qualified absolute. Certainly up to this point. Here we're in transition. I don't have a good name for it here. But here, it's the deity absolute. If you ask me to be very technical, I call it the transitional absolute at this point. The papers use the term qualified absolute and deity absolute. Now, in terms of sequence, this picture is eternal. We have the infinite spirit and Nirvana. This is eternal. This is eternaler. This is eternalist. I have no names for this.
More eternalist, most eternalist.
One, two, three, many.
1, 2, 3, many. But in your thinking, the infinite spirit and Nirvana are coordinately eternal. The eternal sun and paradise are coordinately prior eternal. There had to be paradise before the infinite spirit could function. There had to be an eternal sun to collaborate with the universal Father in the production of the infinite spirit. And the Father is most eternal. Had this happened in time, this would be a proper sequential portraiture. It didn't happen in time. This is the dawn of the first universe age. This picture here I conceive as the zero universe age. This would have marked the universe age before the first universe age. These are negative numbers, so to speak, and there are no such things in actual reality. Here, God is the absolute person. God has yet to divest himself of absolute personality, which he does in the next frame, and that divestment is the eternal Son. We have at no time been informed that the qualified absolute is the equivalent of the infinite.
Are infinite and unqualified used anyway to know?
No. Except I think the unqualified absolute does have infinity of capacity to respond. In a sense, the deity absolute has infinity of capacity to respond along certain lines. As for example, when the Supreme Being, for the first and only time, willed to the act of creation and majeston was produced. Let's read this section on the deity, on God the Absolute. There are many features of the eternal reality of the deity absolute, which cannot be fully explained to the time-space, finite mind. But the actualization of God the Absolute would be in consequence of the unification of the second experiential Trinity, the Absolute Trinity, which is made up of the Supreme Being, God the Ultimate, and the unrevealed consummator of universe destiny. And of course this Trinity cannot appear until God the Ultimate has appeared, and God the Ultimate cannot appear until the whole Master Universe including the fourth and outermost space level, has achieved perfection. This would constitute the experiential realization of absolute divinity. And this means the unification of absolute meanings on absolute levels. Meanings. But we are not certain regarding the encompassment of all absolute values. The suggestion here is that meanings could be achieved, but not all values might be achieved. Why? Because we have at no time been informed that the qualified absolute is the equivalent of the infinite. That's pretty obvious as we look at our third frame. It's only one of the three circles there. It's linked with everything, but it is not in itself everything. Super-ultimate destinies are involved in absolute meanings and infinite spirituality. And without both of these unachieved realities, we cannot establish absolute values. God the Absolute is the realization attainment goal of all super-absonite beings. Absonite is the second floor of our firehouse. Super-absonite would be the third floor. But the power and personality potential of the deity absolute transcends our concept, and we hesitate to discuss those realities which are so far removed from experiential actualization. Yes?
I don't understand super ultimate destinies. Could you
Yes.
elaborate on that?
Our finite destiny is the quest for God the Father and the sometime knowing of God the Supreme. Our ultimate destiny is the quest for God the Father on another level, on the absonite level, and the sometime knowing of God the Ultimate. When we seek God the Father on Paradise Now, we are seeking God as sub-omnipotent, sub-omniscient, and sub-omnipresent. The ultimate quest for the absonite Father is an attempt to understand God as omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. The super-ultimate quest for the Father is an endless quest. This we will not achieve. And here we're seeking him as super-omnipotent, super-omnipresent, and super-omniscient. The subs have meanings, the supers don't. These are just words. This is just saying many, many. Let's go on reading. Since we've gotten into the absolutes, let's spend a little time with them. If we start out today with the absolutes, everything else will be easy, won't it?
Super ultimate.
Is absolute.
Well, if it's ultimate and if it's absolute, the super implies an overtone that we don't have an arm.
That's absolute. Super ultimate is absolute.
All right, super absolute.
Super absolute is a contradiction of terms.
Super finite.
It's like saying super
I
infinity.
guess.
Super finite would then be absonite
Yes.
in this term, in this respect.
It could mean absolute also. It would mean anything above the finite.
Anything above
That could be
the
two
finite.
things. But
Anything
there's only one thing above
more
the
than
absolute. Right, right. God the ultimate and God the absolute are both super finite. But only God the absolute is super ultimate as experiential deity. Now, of course, the Father, Son, and Spirit are on all three of these levels. The Master Spirits are not super ultimate. They run on the first two levels of the firehouse. They run on the 2-inch scale and the 1,600-mile scale, but not on the infinite scale.
What's that?
God the Ultimate and God the Absolute are both super finite. But only God the Absolute is super ultimate as experiential deity. Now, of course, the Father, Son, and Spirit are on all three of these levels. The Master Spirits are not super ultimate. They run on the first two levels of the firehouse. They run on the 2-inch scale and the 1,600-mile scale, but not on the infinite scale.
What's that?
When the combined thought of the Universal Father and the Eternal Son, functioning in the God of action, constituted the creation of the divine and central universe, the Father followed the expression of his thought into the word of his Son and the act of their conjoined executive by differentiating his omnipresence from the potentials of infinity. And these undisclosed infinity potentials remain space concealed in the unqualified absolute and divinely enshrouded in the deity absolute, while these two become one in the functioning of the universal absolute, the unrevealed infinity unity of the Paradise Father. In other words, what they're saying here is that these three absolutes constitute the bottomless wells which the creators are pumping to produce new things. When a creative spirit produces a group of seraphim, these seraphim come from somewhere. They don't come from nothing. When master force organizers come out into apparently open space and initiate those doings which eventually give rise to a whirling nebula, this nebula comes from something, not from nothing. And it's on these great reservoirs that they're drawing. If you will conceive of the three absolutes as the essence, they're the reservoirs of potentiality, then you can think of three absolutes of actuality: the Son, Paradise, and the Spirit. You have three energies. The Son is the absolute of Spirit. Paradise is the absolute of energy matter. And the conjoined actor is the absolute of mind. And now we're thinking of two associations, aren't we? And we can call one the triodity of potentiality, made up of the three absolutes. And the other we can call the triodity of actuality: the Son, the Spirit, and Paradise. And the first source and center we can't classify as either actual or potential. We can call him original. And he balances these two triodities and governs, in the largest sense of that word, the transfer of reality from potential to actual. And this is how God the Supreme grows and all finite growth takes place. And this is how God the Ultimate grows and all absonite growth takes place. And this is the mass movement of the universe, which involves survival and which is distinguished from the minor retrograde motions in the universe, which are non-survival, or the reverse transfer of actuals back into potentials. The universe is just like our solar system. Almost everything that swings around the sun moves in one direction. But there are a few moons of the major planets. There's at least two, and there may be more, I've forgotten. They move in the reverse direction, hence the term retrograde motion. Non-survival is retrograde motion in the cosmic sense. You were going to ask something, right?
Well, I am searching for clarification in the way the papers use the term infinity. In their use of superlatives, that they have special meaning. What is the meaning of infinity?
Infinity is used in several ways.
The I am,
The I am,
the first source and center.
the first source and center does not imply infinity as generally used because God is functional on all levels. But the Father infinite implies that. The largest use of the first source and center implies infinity. You see, they use it in this way too. It's used as finality of meaning value.
A meaning that.
Maybe thing too would be infinity. Infinity would encompass all of any one of these frames. In fact, infinity would encompass all of these frames.
I thought that.
Infinity can never be expressed in time, only in eternity.
Does it become reality?
It is.
Reality.
Ruth, I believe it is real in eternity. But it can never be real. It can never be actual in time. It can be real in time, but much of it must continue to be potential.
Yeah.
Because if you're in time, then there is a future. And the future implies further growth. If you are in eternity, there is no past future. And then infinity can be, but not in time.
Get dizzy with semantics.
Isn't it, though? Korzybski should be here. I mean, I've got a feeling for the non-temporal. I don't say that I have a feeling for eternity, but I do have a feeling for that which lies beyond time. Again, it goes back to a survival decision. When a human being, probably an ascending Morontian would be a better way of putting it, makes a final choice to do the Father's will, that final choice represents the total consecration of that personality. It is an irrevocable choice. That's an eternal choice. Because no quantity of time will alter the basic principles and purposes embodied in that choice. Time will only change technique of execution, but not principle. Now I understand an eternal choice. This is impervious to the passage of time. This is for keeps.
It's inherent in sonship.
Sure it is. Sure it is. Such a creature has made an eternal choice. He made it in time, but he's done something that is absolutely impervious to any possible corrosive effect of any quantity of future time. He just ain't going to change his mind. Now, now I understand eternity as concerns that choice. You can take number to help you. You can pick a large number. The choice still stands. You can double that number. The choice stands. You can square it, cube it, take it to the fourth power. The choice is unchanged. You can take a number tremendously larger than this number we've been working with. There's no change in the choice. Time has no effect on that choice. That's an eternal choice. The choice was made in time. It had an origin in time, but it has no ending in time. This last picture here is the picture of the first universe age. This is the age of Havana. This universe age had an end in time. Both potency of cosmic force and potency of spirit force are in process of progressive revelation realization as the enrichment of all reality is affected by experiential growth.
and through the correlation of the experiential with the existential by the universal absolute. In other words, they're drawing. Everyone's drawing drafts against this tremendous bank of infinity. Force organizers draw a draft, they get a nebula, a physical universe. Creator Sun, Creative Spirit draw sight draft. They people this universe. The life carriers function as channels, and life appears on the planet. Evolution takes place. This life comes from somewhere, you know. It just doesn't just happen. The Father enriches this creation with a bestowal of personality and relative free will. The Son pours out new spirit. Where was that spirit before it got poured out? The ability of the infinite spirit and his creative daughters to bestow mind, and of the master spirits to bestow cosmic mind. There's no limit to this. Where does it come from? There's a tremendous artesian outpouring of new actuality. No change in reality, merely a transfer of that which is real from the potential to the actual stage. And of course this involves going through a very interesting gray area, which I have christened the zone of becoming. Yes.
Would that be the universal absolute, that zone?
No, that's down on the level of actuality. That's us. We are not real actuals, are we? Finalators are, but humans aren't. We are not either the good guys or the bad guys. We're wearing gray hats. Neither white nor black. We are in the zone of becoming.
Your zone of becoming then includes all evolutionary growth.
Of course.
Absonite too?
Yes, I think so. We're in the zone of becoming. We can go either way. We can go positively or we can move retrograde because we have, as Betty will stoutly defend, that power of choice. There is a correlation here of the experiential with the existential by the universal absolute. He affects a linkage not only of the two absolutes, that's his horizontal linkage function, but he also has a vertical linkage operation, which we haven't attempted to portray here. You see, this is all the third story of the firehouse up here. Underneath this are two more stories. And it is the universal absolute that constitutes the steel structure of the firehouse and keeps these stories from collapsing one into the other.
Not the center pole, though.
No, that's the universal father. He's on the walls. I think of him there. And him is the right word to use. For the unqualified absolutes, the word it is very proper. By virtue of the equipoising presence of the universal absolute. Now, what is an equipoising presence? Well, I think the best illustration is the counterweight to an elevator. How about that? And how many of you have ever seen a counterweight to an elevator, in a modern elevator, that isn't a squirrel cage?
French elevator.
Mm-hmm. You know it's there, but you don't see it. And it's what makes it easy to move that elevator. The universal absolute is the counterweight to all sub-absolute reality. He makes weight for it. Or, better still, did you ever stop and think of the tremendous down pressure of the second floor of the firehouse on the first floor?
Yes.
The first floor is only 2 inches high. The second floor is 1,600 miles high. It must contain an awful lot, you know. Why doesn't the bloody thing collapse? The universal absolute acts as a kind of a hydraulic jack, reinforcing that ceiling and keeping the absonite from crushing the finite. Now listen, if we got troubles between the first floor and the second floor, how much more troubles do we encounter when we hit the third floor? Because that isn't a 1,600-mile thing, that's infinity. So he's really got a job to keep the firehouse from collapsing, right? All right, that's what equipoising presence means to me.
That's your vertical now.
Yes. By virtue of the equipoising presence of the universal absolute, the first source and center realizes extension of experiential power, enjoys identification with these evolutionary creatures, and achieves expansion of experiential deity on the levels of supremacy, ultimacy, and absoluteness. And now we can better understand what the universal center was saying when he said, "We perceive that the unfathomability of the cosmic relationships of the universal absolute will tend to grow in proportions as the material universes and their spiritual administration continue to expand. The more stuff you load on these floors, the bigger the counterweight has to become. There's more equipoising to do, hence more presence of an equipoising nature."
Gives the added gravity.
Yes.
And keep drawing on these columns there.
Yeah. When it is not possible fully to distinguish the deity absolute from the unqualified absolute, their supposedly combined function or coordinated presence is designated the action of the universal absolute. Remember that the universal absolute is deity, but unfathomable deity. The deity absolute seems to be the all-powerful activator, while the unqualified absolute appears to be the all-efficient mechanizer. Activator versus mechanizer. What of? Of the supremely unified and ultimately coordinated universe of universes, even universes upon universes, made, making, and yet to be made. Making is the zone of becoming. The deity absolute cannot, or at least does not, react to any universe situation in a sub-absolute manner. Now, they're trying to describe the habit patterns on the third floor. Every response of this absolute to any given situation appears to be made in terms of the welfare of the whole creation of things and beings, not only in its present state of existence, but also in view of the infinite possibilities of all future eternity. This deity absolute is going to react to the problems of Urantia in terms of unimagined creations, a tremendous distance beyond the outer perimeter of the master universe. Because the deity absolute is living in the everlasting now, in eternity. The deity absolute is blind to time. The architects of the master universe see the end from the beginning as concerns the master universe. I don't think they see too much beyond that. They may speculate beyond it. But within that domain, they pretty well know, because they are the blueprints. And they interfere with things. They make them come out right. Personalized thought adjusters are the untrammeled, unassigned, and sovereign stabilizers and compensators of the far-flung universe of universes. They combine the creator and creature experience, existential and experiential. They are conjoint time and eternity beings. They associate the pre-personal and the personal in universe administration. Personalized adjusters are the all-wise and powerful executives of the architects of the master universe. They are the personal agents of the full ministry of the Universal Father. Personal, pre-personal, and superpersonal. They are the personal ministers of the extraordinary, the unusual, and the unexpected throughout all the realms of the transcendental absonite spheres of the domain of God the Ultimate, even to the levels of God the Absolute. And then they make this very real. When the planetary veranda deck observer of Urantia, the Most High Custodian, who not long since assumed an emergency regency of your world, asserted his authority in the presence of the resident Governor General, I visualize him just walking in saying, "I'm taking over." He began his emergency administration of Urantia with a full staff of his own choosing. He immediately assigned to all his associates and assistants their planetary duties. But he did not choose the 3 personalized adjusters who appeared in his presence the instant he assumed the regency. He did not even know that they would thus appear, for they did not so manifest their divine presence at the time of a previous regency. And the Most High Regent did not assign service or designate duties for these volunteer personalized adjusters. Nevertheless, these 3 omnipersonal beings were among the most active of the numerous orders of celestial beings then serving on Urantia. Now look, this veranda deck, who I assume is still resident on our planet, or if he's not, I assume his successor is resident, he's pretty far above us. When he assumes a regency, he's taking things over because of problems down here. And I can't visualize his purpose and intent. But you know something? I think I'm a lot closer to him than he is to these personalized adjusters. I think the architects of the Master Universe are more mysterious to him than he is to us. They're farther away. Yes.
Does the Big Absolute have anything in there?
I don't think so. I think this is the architects of the Master Universe. They're seeing to it that the blueprint works out.
The deity is so far beyond that
Yes.
that he can't see any of it.
He isn't conscious of time. He just reacts. But the architects of the Master Universe are purposeful in relation to time. The Deity Absolute is blind in relation to time. The Deity Absolute cannot deviate from the eternity pattern of reaction. Nothing else has any meaning to the Deity Absolute. The Universal Father escapes all limitations. He's the center pole in the firehouse. He understands timelessness, he understands transcended time, and he understands time. He's conscious on all 3 levels. The Deity Absolute is conscious on only 1 level. The architects of the Master Universe, I think, are functional on the absonite level and are perfectly aware of and can interact with the other 2 levels. Now, this is reasonable. They occupy a midpoint, don't they? The Deity Absolute is that potential which was segregated from total infinite reality by the free will choice of the Universal Father. Please note, frame 2 on the blackboard. That's what this is talking about. Within the Deity Absolute, all divinity activities, existential and experiential, take place. This is the qualified Absolute, in contradistinction to the unqualified Absolute. But the Universal Absolute is superadditive to both in the encompassment of all absolute potential. That's the 3rd circle, yes. That everybody, that they can be really sure. And always remember they say, in case of doubt, we always advance the creature. But I'm going to try not to use my grace period of 30 days on survival.
you superimpose on a real mammalian critter a spark of infinity, I don't think anyone this side of God would have the courage to do that. The indwelling of the adjuster, to me, testifies to God's originality and to God's amazing courage. Stop and think. We are the farthest out. We are the lowest on the totem pole. There is nothing below us which can know God. And yet he's given us a part of himself, something which I would expect him to do to folks that were way up topside. And yet he doesn't indwell them. He doesn't even indwell our near of kin unless they've done time, so to speak. The atoms usually have to serve on a world. The